Which dead celebrities are treated like saints, but were truly awful people when they were alive?
Pablo Picasso was an abusive raging narcissist who sucked the life out of people around him. His muses were generally young women he'd domineer and destroy.
Steve Jobs was an asshole to his family, his own kids hated him, his wife only stayed for the money. He also was known for throwing work colleagues under the bus to cover his own ass, and taking credit for things he didn't invent. Edit. Thanks to everyone for the awards, wasn't expecting this to blow up like it did. Thank you all.
I am from the future and Chris Brown belongs to this list too now.
Ellen DeGeneres too early sorry.
Wasn't John Lennon an abusive husband? Edit. This thread is a beep rollercoaster of emotions.
Thomas Edison, literally one of the biggest pieces of beep, stole patents, stomped out competitors with physical force and violence, electrocuted an elephant to mislead the public his inferior power grid was less dangerous than Nikola Tesla's, and a lot more.
P.T. Barnum, all cause of The Greatest Showman's skeptical smiley face.
Big Pun. His kids and widow Beep hated him. He pistol whipped his wife in front of his children and broke her face.
My mother, who was a young adult during Bing Crosby's peak, said that he was a horrible husband and father. A serial philanderer and violent.
Reading all these things, is there anyone who wasn't the worst?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Bing Crosby. Years ago, while watching Blue Skies with him and Fred Astaire, my dad gushed over Astaire's legacy. I asked what Bing was like and he said, besides beating his wife and kids. What a voice. Can't watch anything with him in it now. He was a monster to anyone close to him.
Alfred Hitchcock was really terrible.
Paul Allen. Anyone that has a "not allowed to look at me" policy in place for his own arena staff is kind of a dick. Edit. Didn't expect this to blow up at all.
Frank Lloyd Wright. Abandoned his wife and children to take a mistress, who was herself already married. He drove his butler insane, and the guy ended up killing Wright's mistress and her kids, burned down his studio, and committed suicide by drinking acid. Wright wasn't there at the time. Wright's response to this was to rebuild the studio exactly as it was before, supposedly to honor his mistress and their children, but it was pretty obvious to people at the time that he just wanted to protect his legacy as an architect, as many of his most famous innovations were showcased in the design. Sure enough, it became the museum to his work and is still visited today.
Frank Sinatra. My grandpa's girlfriend and her husband used to work for him, and he was a right bastard. Didn't think that he had to pay people that worked for him, treated employees bad, all the usual human stuff. Edit. My grandpa was a widower and his girlfriend was a widow.
XXXTentacion was a piece of beep.
I hate saying it because outside of this incident he actually seemed like a good guy. But on 2 occasions, Paul Walker dated 16-year-old girls. Once when he was 28, and again when he was 32. This was all while he had a young daughter of his own. The age of consent in California is 18, meaning if he did anything sexual with them, he could have been charged and indicted on statutory rape. I guess being a predator is okay, though, if you're really good looking.
I haven't seen Michael Landon's name come up yet. He did amazing on Little House on the Prairie, but apparently he was actually a raging alcoholic and even his own kids made a documentary about the father I knew.
Jimmy Savile. Until after he died and everything came out about the bad stuff he did.
I've worked for Prince and it's a not so hidden secret he was absolutely awful to work with. There used to be a saying, you're nobody in this industry until you've been fired by Prince. He's a legend for sure, but was awful to those who put the show on, and his ego was out of control. And when it came down to it, he died from an odd, so for someone who was so quick to fire anyone over a simple mistake and he's so critical of weakness, it turns out he had some hidden weaknesses of his own. Also, from all accounts Jim Morrison was an awful person.
Elvis. He was with Priscilla when she was 15. I think it's probably safe to assume they were having sex.
Pablo Picasso.
Johnny Carson. He cheated on his wives and was an all-around prick when he wasn't on camera. The most widely known example was him telling Joan Rivers that she'd never become the star of The Tonight Show. She was the permanent guest host at the time, then refusing to ever speak to her again after she got a job elsewhere.
Didn't U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy once kill his assistant while driving?
Dr. Seuss had an affair for years while his wife battled cancer. drove her to suicide, married the woman he'd been having the affair with a couple months later.
I feel like Cosby is as good as dead and would have been beatified if he had died before he got caught.
About 60% of them all. Most people don't get to the top by being nice, but there are exceptions.
Wow, I have learned so much from this comment section.
Probably XXXTentacion.
It's probably come up time and again, but John Lennon was not a nice man. His son grew to despise him enough to tell Paul McCartney that he wished Paul was his father.
Salvador Dali was a fascist that beat women. Patton and MacArthur were pretty beat people too.
Alexander Hamilton.
Frank Lloyd Wright. He is seen as a visionary in architecture, but he was a horrible person IRL. Raging narcissist, abandoned his wife and kids to run off with the wife of one of his clients. Nailed down his selected furniture in a client's home because he didn't like what the client wanted, etc.
Jerry Lewis. He treated his family like beep, cut his kids out of his will, and was a real boss on set. Watch some clips on YouTube of him and his behavior. Terrible. Most likely stemming from when he and Dean Martin split from being Martin and Lewis. Everyone thought Dean would disappear and Jerry would go on to be a massive star. As it turned out, it was the complete reverse. He was a bitter, bitter person.
Since no one mentioned them yet. Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. In her letters to Beauvoir mentions several romantic and sexual relationship with female students of hers. In one case she met a 17-year-old student who she had a relationship, and later introduced her to Sartre, who also began to have sex with her. There were a few others who basically made up Sartre's personal harem, while de Beauvoir acted as the pimp, seducing teenage girls into threesomes with Sartre. Additionally, both were signatories of a petition to remove the age of consent laws in France. The petition was written by a known pedo, Gabriel Matzneff, and signed by other French intellectuals including Foucault, who himself has been accused of sodomizing boys.
Stay away from anyone who worships Sid Vicious because allegedly killed his groupie girlfriend Nancy under drug influence, known for being abusive and violent for no apparent reason, had several assault charges filed against him, strangled a cat to death with his belt. Couldn't actually play bass but was recruited in the band for his violent nature, full-blown heroin addict. All this, brushed under the name of being punk. His fans defend him, saying his mum supplied him drugs since an early age, or Nancy was a beep, or he had a beep childhood, which is fine, but what is your excuse for idolizing this horrible person? He couldn't even play? Edit. Here's a jury transcript of the testimonies of police officers after Nancy's murder, where Sid confesses to stabbing Nancy and also admitting he cleaned the murder weapon after discovering her body in the morning. You know, if anyone's.
Bing Crosby. Father of the century. Physically and mentally abusive to all his kids, alcoholic, adulterer, slimy businessman. Check it out.
Ray Charles. Made children all over the place and refused to acknowledge them.
By some Stones fans, Brian Jones. He deserves to be honored for his role in the band, and for his musical contributions, and it's a shame how his life ended, but he also had a history of domestic violence.
Here's a few in song form. The Chaser, Eulogy.
James Brown, Yikes.
How soon until Woody Allen dies? Can we just include people who are really old and long past their sell-by date?
Kirk Douglas. It's an open secret in Hollywood that he raped Natalie Wood.
Coco Chanel, revered fashion icon and also Nazi sympathizer.
Maradona. I love my football, but goodness, he was a terrible person.
Thomas Beep Edison.
Lou Reed. I love the Velvet Underground, but many of the band members were awful.
Sonny Bono. Massive prick before he passed. Used to hang out and play Sega at his house with his kid.
He's not dead, but didn't George Lopez cheat on his wife that gave him a kidney by hooking up with some prostitutes?
May your day be filled with joy and happiness. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more quality content every day.